So we've got all of our stuff in. That's great. I'm gonna just hide some layers that I don't really want to worry about right now, and maybe I'll come back to them. We'll see. So let's talk about two things in this video. We're gonna talk about something which we call destructive editing, right? Which is actually changing the picture itself, the layer itself. And then we'll talk about non-destructive editing next time. It's masking, which is a different thing. But for destructive editing, we'll start there. So that's when you draw on or you erase from an existing image you have in Photoshop. And then we'll talk a little bit about blend modes, right? Which are different ways of stacking layers on top of each other. So those are the next two tools that we're gonna play with in Photoshop, all right? So let's start with destructive editing, right? So let's say I'm on this jukebox layer from this jukebox show. Okay, here she is. And let's say I wanted to just like erase the edges of it so that it kind of blends into a layer behind it, right? So that it kind of like floats in the corner down here or something so that it's not this sharp edge, okay? The first thing I have to do when I want to destructively edit it, right? So I'm gonna just want to use my eraser tool to delete off some edges. It's got this, you can't do it, this no way Jose symbol on my cursor right now. And that's because if I click to try and erase, it says, the smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Edit contents will no longer be available, okay? Do I want to rasterize the smart object? And the answer is yes, okay, please do that, all right? So you'll notice when I rasterized that object, it became just a collection of pixels down here. It no longer has the little picture of a piece of paper. And what that means is that it is now no longer linked to this picture in my folder. It's just like a copy of it that's exactly this size inside of this file, okay? And that's fine for this project. So here we are. Now I have this rasterized object. I can just delete or eraser, right, things from the inside of it. I don't really want it to be like a weird squiggly eraser. So I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo until I get back to the main image. I'm gonna look at my eraser options up here at the top, right? So if you go into where it says 80 on mine, it might say something else on yours. It might say like 13 or something, and then it's a much smaller eraser, right? So this is your size, and then this is your hardness. So completely soft, right, has this fuzzy edge. You see that? Yes? Whereas completely hard will have a really sharp edge, okay? And depending on what you're doing, you'll choose a different type of edge for your brush. But since I want it to kind of blend together, I'm gonna use the very, very soft edge. So let's say I just wanted to like go straight across the top and erase that top edge and just make it blend evenly across the top into the thing above it. The first thing I'm gonna do is make my brush bigger, make the eraser circle bigger. And the way I'm gonna do that this time is I'm gonna use a keyboard shortcut on my keyboard, the brackets, right? So like right above the return key and below the delete key, you have open and close brackets. If you click on the one on the right, it gets bigger. Click on the one on the left, it gets smaller, right? So that's like a quick shortcut to make your brush bigger and smaller, right? I'm gonna make mine nice and big. And then I'm gonna erase across this top edge, right? And I'm gonna just kind of like do my best, I erase this top edge, right? It's not too bad, it's not great, but it's not too bad, right? If I wanted to be precise, if I wanted to go exactly straight up and down, I would set down my eraser by clicking with my mouse, and then I would, after I click my mouse, I would hold the Shift key, and that will keep my eraser straight up and down. No matter where I put it, it's only erasing straight up and down from where I started, okay? The same would be true if I went left to right. So if I click and I go left to right, it's just gonna go straight left to right, right? It's not going to do any of those other edges, okay? So that's one way, right? And I might want something a little bit less, you know, square. It's okay to just kind of do like a softer edge, right? That kind of follows the shape of the image too, right? And this big fluffy eraser brush is gonna let me get away with that, okay? So that's one way to edit using the eraser tool, right? So now I have this piece that I can just blend over top of wherever it happens to land, okay? So another way of editing to combine images is using the blend modes tool, okay? So if I wanted it to look like I had drawn the picture, this image, right? I'm going to transform it so it's a little bit bigger. That was Command T. Just make it a little bigger. If I wanted to make it look like it's all sitting on top of this chalkboard, right? I can change the blend mode of this image, okay? So that it all looks, so that like this chalky texture comes through the whole thing. And there are a bunch of different blend modes. You'll notice them, right? So I can use different ones depending on what my goal is, right? And you can kind of see they each do something slightly different. So lighten is kind of cool, right? Because it just sort of brings it on top of it. Screen is kind of cool too. Color dodge does a neat thing, right? So these are all different versions of a blend mode depending on the individual settings. So after you have edited your image, maybe you want to blend it on into something behind it, right? And you can play with all these different blend modes to see what they do, because each one does something slightly different, okay? I kind of like screen, so we're gonna do that as mine, okay? So that's using blend modes to stack layers on top of each other in ways that are interesting, right? Or that do, that like create those layers without using an eraser or using transparency. You can also, instead of using a blend mode, you can also play with stuff like this opacity, and that's going to just be like, what's the master opacity of the layer? Opacity is how solid it is, okay? So if I'm looking at this layer right here, right, let's turn that one off. If I'm looking at this layer, I can also choose to just change the opacity, right, in order to make it look transparent. Right? So that's not using a blend mode, that's just changing how transparent that image is relative to an image behind it. Okay? So those are a couple properties of layers and some basic editing that you can do as you combine images together. I think that's it for today. So go ahead and work on your projects, and I will see you next time. Thank you.